It started behind closed doors, inside a royal summit that was supposed to shape the monarchy's future. Senior royals arrived, expecting routine discussions about succession, public duties, and the institution's next chapter. Instead, one unexpected name appeared on an internal briefing document, a name that instantly changed the atmosphere inside the room: Prince Harry. And according to palace whispers, Prince William was not prepared for what came next. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the meeting carried the weight of duty, not danger. It was meant to be another controlled conversation about the future of the crown, the kind of careful planning the monarchy survives on when the world outside grows louder. William entered that summit not as a wounded brother, but as the heir preparing for the long road ahead. He expected strategy. He expected structure. He expected the usual careful language about public service, royal workload, and the changing demands on a modern monarchy. But then Charles reportedly introduced something no one around the table seemed fully ready for: an advisory panel designed to help guide future royal decisions, with voices from across the family circle. For a moment, it sounded harmless, even sensible. Then the briefing page turned, and Harry's name appeared among the suggested contributors. The room did not need an outburst to feel the shock. It moved like cold air through the walls. Aides, who had spent years managing the fallout of interviews, memoirs, accusations, and broken trust, reportedly exchanged uneasy looks, as if silently asking whether this had been approved, tested, or even understood. William, according to palace whispers, first believed there had been some mistake. Perhaps it was an old draft. Perhaps Harry's name had been included as a symbolic note, not a serious proposal. But Charles did not dismiss it. He did not wave it away. He allowed the room to sit with it. And that was when the meeting changed from institutional planning into something far more personal. For William, this was no longer about paperwork. It was about loyalty, memory, and the painful question of how much damage one family could absorb before trust stopped being repairable. Harry's name was not just a name on a page. It carried every old wound back into the room. And as Charles continued, the silence around William became heavier, sharper, and impossible to ignore. But the appearance of Harry's name was only the beginning, because the reasons behind Charles's discord's decision would prove even more shocking. For years, the divide between the brothers had seemed impossible to bridge. Public interviews, memoir revelations, and years of mutual distrust had created wounds that many believed could never fully heal. Yet now, according to insiders, King Charles appeared ready to take a risk that could either reunite the family or trigger a crisis at the heart of the crown. Charles reportedly framed the idea as an act of survival, not surrender. To him, the monarchy could not move into its next chapter while one of its most painful fractures remained unresolved in the shadows. Advisors around him were said to be discussing long-term stability, future public duties, and the emotional weight of a family still watched by the world. Some believed the king wanted one final attempt at reconciliation before the next great transition arrived, before William carried the full burden of the throne, and before old wounds hardened into permanent exile. But what sounded noble in Charles's mind felt dangerous to others in the room. Harry's proposed role was described as limited, almost symbolic, a voice from outside the working core rather than a hand on the steering wheel. Yet symbolism matters inside a monarchy. A name on a panel can become a signal. A seat near power can become a message. And for William, that message was impossible to ignore. Reports suggest he listened as Charles spoke about unity, family consultation, and the value of bringing distant voices closer before decisions became final. But the more Charles explained, the more William's patience reportedly began to thin. Because this was not simply a son being invited back into conversation. This was Harry, whose choices had left deep scars across the institution William was preparing to protect. Palace insiders claim Charles saw value in mending the family before history judged him too harshly. Others warned the move could weaken the trust that still held the inner circle together. That was the cruel divide taking shape. A father reaching for peace, and an heir guarding the crown from another storm. Around the table, opinions split quietly but sharply. Some attendees reportedly saw Charles's proposal as brave, a controlled opening that might prevent further bitterness. Others saw it as a dangerous crack in the fortress, a gesture that could be read as forgiveness without accountability. And William, carrying years of disappointment beneath royal discipline, reportedly grew more frustrated with every careful phrase. He did not want emotional language dressed as strategy. He wanted clarity. He wanted protection. He wanted to know why the institution should risk reopening a door that had once released so much chaos. As Charles continued outlining his vision, William reportedly realized this was no symbolic gesture. It was a serious proposal with real consequences. There are moments in royal history when a single decision changes the course of relationships forever. According to reports, one such moment arrived during the summit, when details of the advisory panel were finally explained. What William heard next reportedly pushed the conversation beyond disagreement and into outright confrontation. The proposal, as Palace Whispers describe it, was not meant to place Harry back at the center of royal power, but it was designed to let him influence future conversations from a carefully limited distance. And that was enough to ignite the room. Because influence, inside the monarchy, is never a small thing. It is access. It is recognition. It is a signal to staff, courtiers, and the public that a person once pushed to the edge may still have a path back toward the inner circle. For William, that idea reportedly landed with the force of a betrayal. He questioned how trust could be rebuilt when the damage had never truly been settled. How could the family speak of stability while inviting back a voice tied to so many public wounds? How could the crown protect its future if it softened the lines around those who had challenged it so openly? References were reportedly made to the interviews, the disclosures, the memoir, and the long shadow they left over the family. The room, once controlled and formal, began to lose its calm. Several attendees are said to have tried to lower the temperature, reminding both sides that the panel was only advisory, that no final authority was being offered, that Charles was seeking healing rather than surrender. But William did not hear healing. He heard risk, and Charles, despite the rising tension, remained committed to explaining his case. To him, the monarchy's future could not be built only on silence and distance. He appeared to believe that one carefully managed opening might prevent a deeper family fracture later. But the more he defended the idea, the more emotional the discussion became. Old wounds returned with brutal force. The brothers were not even both present, yet their history filled the summit like a storm. William was reportedly carrying the burden of the heir, the protector, the son who had stayed, the brother who had watched private pain become public spectacle. Charles was carrying a different burden, the father, who feared time was running out to repair what had been broken. And between those two burdens, the room found no easy peace. Every careful sentence seemed to sharpen the divide. Every attempt at compromise exposed how far apart the family remained. What began as a proposal about advice had become a test of loyalty, forgiveness, and power. Yet the strongest reaction was still to come, because William soon faced a choice that would send shockwaves through the palace. Witnesses rarely speak about private royal meetings, but according to persistent palace whispers, the atmosphere inside the summit became impossible to ignore. Years of frustration, disappointment, and unresolved conflict appeared to collide in one dramatic moment that no attendee would soon forget. William, who had listened through each careful explanation, reportedly stopped treating the proposal as a family matter and challenged it as a threat to institutional trust. The question was no longer whether Harry could be given a harmless voice from the sidelines. The question was whether the crown could afford to blur the line between forgiveness and authority. William's concern, according to insiders, was direct and unforgiving. Loyalty had to mean something, and accountability could not be skipped simply because time had passed. The debate shifted instantly. What began as a discussion about future planning became a confrontation over trust, duty, and the price of returning to influence. Senior figures reportedly tried to soften the clash, urging calm, reminding the room that the monarchy had survived by absorbing pain privately and presenting unity publicly. But unity, William seemed to suggest, could not be built on silence alone. Charles, meanwhile, reportedly stood firm, convinced that his proposal was not weakness, but wisdom, a controlled attempt to keep the family from breaking beyond repair. And that was the tragedy of the moment. Both men believed they were protecting the monarchy. Both believed history would punish the wrong choice. Yet they were standing on opposite sides of the same wound. The room grew tense in a way no aide could manage. Every word carried years behind it. Every pause seemed to drag old grievances back into the present. William reportedly raised strong concerns about whether Harry could be trusted with sensitive conversations, even in a limited role, after so much had already spilled into public view. Charles, according to palace whispers, pushed back with the argument that exclusion had solved nothing and might only harden the divide. Then came the silence. Not ordinary silence, but the kind that falls when everyone understands a line has been reached. William's frustration, held tightly for years beneath royal discipline, reportedly reached its peak. The heir who had stayed, served, and carried the burden of continuity was now being asked to accept a path that felt to him like reopening the gates without repairing the damage first. And in that charged stillness, reports claim William made his decision. He did not continue the debate. He did not allow the proposal to be dressed in softer words. He abruptly left the meeting, turning a private disagreement into a palace shock that could no longer be contained. William's departure stunned those inside the room but outside the meeting. The fallout was only beginning. The moment word of the confrontation began circulating through royal corridors, concern spread rapidly among staff and advisors. A disagreement between father and son was troubling enough, but a dispute involving Harry threatened to reopen divisions many believed had finally settled into an uneasy silence. What had happened inside the summit was supposed to remain locked behind careful protocol, but palace tension rarely stays hidden for long when the future of the crown is at stake. Reports suggest staff moved quickly to contain the whispers, tightening conversations, limiting internal chatter, and trying to stop one explosive detail from becoming the story everyone chased. Yet the damage had already begun. The image of William walking away from a meeting connected to Harry's possible return to royal influence was too powerful, too dramatic, too loaded with history to disappear quietly. Advisors reportedly feared renewed public scrutiny, not only of Harry's place in the family, but of Charles's judgment at a moment when the monarchy needed steadiness. Questions spread fast. Was this a serious reconciliation plan? Was Harry truly being considered for a future advisory role? Or had Charles simply tested an idea that now threatened to expose deeper divisions inside the Night Palace? Royal commentators, sensing the tremor beneath the official silence, began speculating about what the confrontation revealed. Some saw it as proof that William had become the firm guardian of the institution, unwilling to risk royal trust for emotional experiments. Others viewed Charles as a father trying to heal a family wound before it became permanent. Behind the scenes, supporters of both men reportedly took quiet sides. Those close to William emphasized duty, caution, and accountability. Those sympathetic to Charles pointed toward age, legacy, and the pain of a father still hoping for peace between his sons. But every private argument only made the internal strain worse. Relationships that had been carefully managed began to feel more fragile. Conversations became guarded. Even simple decisions were reportedly touched by the larger question of Harry's shadow over the future. Public image concerns soon dominated the palace mood. The monarchy could survive disagreement, but it could not afford the appearance of chaos at its center. And this was the danger. The dispute was no longer only about whether Harry might sit on a panel. It was about whether the House of Windsor could still control its own story. If Harry was included, critics might call it weakness. If he was excluded forever, others might call it cruelty. Either path carried risk. Either path could reopen old battles. And with William's frustration now impossible to ignore, uncertainty around Harry's potential involvement grew darker, sharper, and more urgent. As speculation intensified, attention turned toward one crucial question: what would Charles do next? For King Charles, the controversy reportedly created an impossible balancing act. On one side stood the future king and heir to the throne. On the other stood a son many believe he still hopes to reconcile with. Whatever decision he made next would carry consequences far beyond a single meeting. The weight of that choice reportedly settled over the palace like a storm no one could fully name. Charles was not only acting as monarch, he was acting as a father, and those two roles were now pulling him in opposite directions. As king, he had to protect the institution, guard its trust, and avoid anything that could make the crown appear uncertain. As a father, he faced the painful reality of two sons divided by years of bitterness, public conflict, and emotional distance. Advisors reportedly came to him with conflicting warnings. Some urged caution, telling him that any formal path for Harry, even a limited one, could be seen as rewarding past damage without demanding repair. Others argued that shutting the door completely might deepen the wound and leave history to judge Charles as a king who failed to heal his own house. Reconciliation, according to palace whispers, remained one of his quiet concerns, not because he wished to erase the past, but because he knew the monarchy's future could not escape the family story attached to it. Yet institutional stability soon became the center of every private discussion. If the advisory panel moved forward, who would control access? What information would be shared? How would loyalty be measured? And, most importantly, could William be expected to accept a structure he believed threatened the crown's inner trust? Pressure began rising from different royal factions, each seeing the crisis through a different lens. Some viewed William's anger as necessary strength, the voice of a future king, refusing to let emotion weaken the walls of the monarchy. Others saw Charles's instinct for reconciliation as a final attempt to prevent the House of Windsor from becoming permanently divided. Between those views, Charles reportedly weighed the long-term consequences with growing unease. Every option seemed to carry a hidden cost. If he sided fully with William, Harry's distance could harden forever. If he continued defending the proposal, he risked straining his bond with the heir at the very moment the monarchy needed unity. What had begun as an advisory idea had become a question about future governance, family trust, and who would shape the crown after Charles. And so the monarchy entered a period of uncertainty, where every silence seemed deliberate, every delay felt strategic, and every private conversation carried the danger of another break. But while Charles searched for a path forward, another figure was quietly watching events unfold from the shadows. Throughout royal crises, some of the most important voices are often the ones least heard in public. As tensions escalated between father and son, attention quietly shifted toward Catherine, a figure known for calm judgment during moments of extraordinary pressure. While others weighed power, pride, and old wounds, Catherine reportedly remained focused on one thing above all else: stability. Not the kind of stability created by silence, but the kind built through careful choices, protected boundaries, and quiet emotional strength. In the days after William's dramatic exit from the summit, palace observers began to wonder whether Catherine's influence would become the hidden force shaping what happened next. She had no need to enter the public argument. That was never her way. Her power was quieter. But inside the royal world, quiet power can be the most difficult to challenge. Many saw her as a bridge between competing factions, someone who understood William's pain, but also recognized the danger of a family fracture becoming permanent. Close observers have long noted her growing influence, not through loud declarations, but through steadiness during crisis. And for William, that steadiness reportedly mattered more than ever. His decisions were not shaped only by royal duty, they were also shaped by protecting his family, shielding his children from chaos, and making sure the future they inherited was not poisoned by endless conflict. Catherine, according to palace whispers, understood that burden deeply. She knew that every choice around Harry's potential involvement would echo beyond the adults who carried the original wounds. It would reach the next generation. It would touch George, Charlotte, and Louis. It would define what kind of royal family they were being asked to grow into. That is why advisors reportedly valued Catherine's discretion. She did not inflame the crisis. She did not feed the speculation. She remained calm in the very space where others felt pressure rising. Yet behind the scenes, her role appeared increasingly important. If William was the firm shield of the institution, Catherine was the steady hand, reminding him that strength must be guided, not simply unleashed. And if Charles was still searching for reconciliation, Catherine may have represented the one path where caution and compassion could exist together. But even that balance was fragile, because no matter how carefully she approached the crisis, she could not erase the years of mistrust that had brought the family to this point. She could guide, soften, and steady the conversation, but she could not rebuild trust alone. Future family unity may depend partly on her wisdom, yet the decision still rested with men divided by duty, regret, and fear. Yet even Catherine's sistingos could not erase the deeper question now hanging over the monarchy. What began as a private summit may ultimately be remembered as a defining moment in the modern royal story. Whether Harry ever joins such a panel may matter less than what the proposal revealed. The divisions within the family remain far deeper than many had hoped. The summit had exposed something raw beneath the polished language of duty and unity. It showed that the wounds of the past were not safely buried. They were still alive, still powerful, still capable of shaking the future of the crown when one unexpected name appeared in the wrong room at the wrong time. Questions now remain over Harry's future role, but the larger question is even heavier. Can the monarchy truly move forward while trust inside the family remains so uncertain? William's reaction reportedly placed his relationship with Charles under fresh scrutiny, not as a simple dispute between father and son, but as a clash between two visions of survival. Charles appeared to believe that reconciliation, however limited, might protect the family from permanent fracture. William appeared to believe that protection must come before forgiveness, and that the crown cannot afford to gamble with loyalty when the stakes are this high. Public fascination with the royal drama only intensified because people sensed the deeper tragedy. This was not just about one advisory panel, it was about legacy, duty, pain, and the impossible cost of being born into a family where private heartbreak becomes national history. Behind palace walls, advisors reportedly continued searching for common ground, trying to shape a path that would not humiliate Charles, provoke William, or give Harry a role that could reopen old distrust. Yet every possible answer carried risk. Too much distance could harden the divide forever. Too much openness could make the institution appear weak. And somewhere between those extremes, the future leadership of the monarchy remained under quiet discussion. Reconciliation still seemed uncertain, but not impossible. That is what made the crisis so powerful. No door had fully closed, but none had safely opened either. Catherine's steady influence, Charles's desire for peace, William's instinct to protect, and Harry's unresolved place in the family all remained caught in the same royal storm. The crown, once again, stood between blood and duty. It had survived wars, scandals, abdications, and grief, but the most painful battles were often the ones fought inside the family itself. And as the palace searched for its next move, one truth became impossible to ignore. The future of the monarchy would not be shaped only by ceremony, titles, or tradition, but by whether trust could ever be rebuilt after being broken so publicly. Because in the House of Windsor, the most significant battles are rarely fought in public, they unfold behind palace doors, where family, duty, and destiny are forever intertwined. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.